She walked away from nearly 2 decades in corporate America, moved to a state she'd barely set foot in, and took over a cattle ranch with zero ranching experience. Then her husband announced their divorce on YouTube, in front of nearly 300,000 people. And instead of walking away from the channel too, she took it over completely, rebuilt her entire life around it, and became one of the most authentic voices in American agriculture. That woman is Erin Galloway, the sole creator behind Our Wyoming Life, the largest agriculture YouTube channel in the state of Wyoming. By the time you finish this video, you'll understand exactly what Erin confirmed, why she kept going after everything fell apart, and what the channel has quietly become in the years since the split. A story bigger than anyone who clicked the original announcement video could have guessed. Nobody who watched the early days of Our Wyoming Life would have guessed this was never the plan. Erin grew up in San Francisco. By her own description, she hated every minute of it. She felt, as she put it, born in the wrong place and the wrong time. The city, the noise, the distance from land and animals, none of it fit. But she stayed in that world, built a career in it, and by her late 20s had climbed into a senior role in corporate radio and advertising. She was good at it. That much was clear. It was in that corporate radio world that she met Mike Galloway. Mike had his own interesting background. He'd served in the military, become a radio DJ, and eventually built a syndicated program that ran on over 200 stations nationwide. That led to a VP of Operations position with a major East Coast radio group. The two of them were working in the same industry, moving in the same circles. They married, and for a while the corporate career track looked like the path forward for both of them. Then Erin's stepfather, Gilbert, fell ill. Gilbert owned and operated the ranch in Campbell County, Wyoming, a spread south of Gillette, laid out across a few thousand acres amid what Cowboy State Daily later described as pyramid and tabletop buttes. He was the man who had given Erin roots, a place that felt more like home than San Francisco ever did. When his health declined, Erin and Mike made the call most people in their position would never make. They quit their corporate jobs, both of them. Nearly 20 years of accumulated career capital, gone. They drove to Wyoming with no ranching experience and started learning from scratch. And here is the part most people gloss over when they tell this story. Erin was not walking into something familiar. She was walking into a world where she had to figure out cattle feeding, crop cycles, animal husbandry, and farm business operations all at the same time. Mike would later admit he went as far as buying a book called Beef Cattle for Dummies. That's not a criticism. That's what honest looks like. And if you think that transition was enough of a pivot, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. When Gilbert passed away a few years after they arrived, Erin and Mike committed fully to continuing his legacy on the ranch. That decision locked in the direction of everything that followed. The ranch became the priority. The family grew, 3 children. The operation expanded from a straight cow-calf setup into something more ambitious. Locally raised beef, pork, eggs, fresh produce. Erin started attending farmers markets in the area, selling directly to consumers, and developing a philosophy around local food that would eventually define the entire brand. The YouTube channel was not a master plan. In 2017, they posted a single video, 4.5 minutes of footage showing how their cattle were raised on the ranch. The goal was simple: promote the local beef business. That was it. No series in mind, no editorial calendar, no brand strategy. The video went viral. Within 24 hours, they had accumulated 1,500 subscribers to a channel they hadn't planned on making. Neither Erin nor Mike had set out to become content creators, but they understood media. Both of them came from broadcast backgrounds, and they recognized what that number meant. People were interested, not in celebrity, not in drama, in the actual, unglamorous process of raising food on American land. They kept posting. The channel built steadily from there. Weekly uploads, day-in-the-life content, real ranch operations, feeding cattle in -30-degree Wyoming winters, managing crops, processing animals, dealing with equipment failures and livestock loss. By the early 2020s, the channel had crossed 100,000 subscribers. YouTube sent them the silver plaque. The platform began recognizing them as one of Wyoming's largest creators. At its peak as a 2-person operation, Our Wyoming Life was sitting at nearly 280,000 subscribers, with total views in the tens of millions. But here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. For years, the channel ran as a family production. Mike and Erin, the ranch, the kids, the animals, that was the formula. And it worked, because the audience wasn't watching for entertainment in the conventional sense. They were watching for authenticity. for the sense of being led into a life most of them would never live themselves. Then in early 2024, Mike confirmed what a section of the audience had suspected was coming. He made an announcement video. He and Erin were divorcing. The reasons were kept private, both of them made that clear. No specific cause was disclosed. No blame was placed publicly. The only confirmed facts were these. The marriage had ended, the ranch belonged to Erin's side of the family, and Mike would be stepping away from the channel. Erin would continue Our Wyoming Life alone. For a channel built around the idea of sharing a life together on a ranch, a husband and wife partnership documented across hundreds of videos, the split hit the audience hard. The comment sections filled up. Long-term viewers who had watched the children grow up, who had followed along through harvests and harsh winters and calving seasons, were processing a loss that was not technically theirs to process. That's the particular intimacy of this kind of content. You're not just watching strangers. You feel like you know them. What came next? Most people who followed this story stop here. But the real story starts right now. Taking over the channel alone was not a guaranteed move. There are plenty of examples in the rural creator space where a split like this ends the channel entirely, or at least produces a years-long plateau while the remaining partner figures out what the content even is without the other person in the frame. The dynamic changes. The identity of the channel is tied up in the partnership, and when the partnership ends, the audience sometimes goes with it. Erin did not plateau. She took ownership of the channel, updated the branding to reflect her solo operation, and kept uploading. The content shifted in tone, more personal, more direct, more unfiltered. She was now posting from inside her John Deere Gator, using the enclosed cab like a confessional booth, pointing her smartphone at herself and talking straight into the camera about what her day actually looked like. Breeding cattle, running brand inspections, managing a farm store on the ranch off Highway 50, shipping USDA-inspected beef and pork across all 50 states. The ranch had by this point transitioned to a fully direct-to-consumer model. No middlemen, no grocery store distribution. Every pound of beef, every egg, every head of produce moves either through the farm store on-site or through the online storefront. Customers across the country order meat from the ranch and receive it directly from the source. That model was Erin's vision from the beginning. She had been the driving force behind the local food expansion long before the channel existed. She also started building a small team. Jeff Lake, who had spent 2 decades working ground crews for an airline in California before making his own transition to ranch life, came on to help with the operation. Martha Larson joined seasonally to support Erin's nonprofit work. 2 people, but meaningful ones, because the ranch had grown beyond what one person could manage alone. She was raising 3 children, running a cattle operation, maintaining a 100% direct-to-consumer business model, and posting videos through all of it. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me because this next part is why the whole story matters. There is a video from the summer of 2025 that the audience didn't see coming. On a mid-August afternoon, Erin sat in her Gator on summer pasture, clouds building behind her. She had not posted a video in nearly 2 weeks, unusual for a creator at her pace, and she opened the camera to explain why. Her biological father had died. The county coroner had contacted her as next of kin. What followed was one of the most raw things she had ever put on the channel. She explained, into the camera, as a storm rolled in around her, that her parents had divorced when she was 13, that her father had struggled with alcohol addiction, that the last time she had seen him in person, to her own recollection, was in the year 2000, before she went to college. A quarter-century of distance between them. And yet when he passed, Erin handled it, cleaned out his apartment, made the funeral arrangements, did what needed to be done. She had talked extensively on the channel over the years about her stepfather Gilbert, the man whose ranch she now ran, whose memory she said had driven her decisions every single season since he died. Gilbert was the father figure she referenced consistently, the anchor of the family history embedded in the land itself. The biological father had never entered the narrative publicly. Until that August afternoon, in the storm. The comment section responded the way it always did when Erin let the audience fully in, with something that looked less like internet engagement and more like genuine community. The channel's core audience, which skews toward men between 40 and 65, showed up with something closer to shared experience than sympathy. What she said in that video, that she shares these things because she believes people feel alone in what they're going through, and sharing her experiences makes that better, is the clearest articulation of why the channel has survived what it survived. She never talked about this publicly. Until now. Here is something that rarely comes up when people discuss Our Wyoming Life, and it reframes what the channel actually is. Alongside the ranch business and the YouTube operation, Erin is also the co-founder and executive director of the Edible Prairie Project, a nonprofit she launched with a co-founder focused on food security in Campbell County and the broader Northeast Wyoming region. The mission of the Edible Prairie Project is explicit: bridging the food insecurity gap through sustainable food production, equitable food distribution, and building community connections around local growing. This is not a side project. It is not a brand extension for content purposes. The nonprofit grew out of a problem Erin identified through her own experience at the Gillette farmers markets: that local food was difficult to access for people who needed it most, and that small local producers like herself had almost no structural support for expanding their operations. The Edible Prairie Project was designed to solve both ends of that equation. On one side, helping consumers, particularly those with food insecurity, get access to locally raised food. On the other, giving producers a vehicle to grow their businesses in a way that was economically viable. Martha Larson, the third member of the ranch's small working team, joined specifically to support this work. The squash harvest, documented in the October 2025 Cowboy State Daily feature, was part of that mission in action: not just ranch production for the farm store, but produce grown and distributed through the nonprofit. This is the part of the Our Wyoming Life story that gets lost in the divorce narrative and the channel takeover conversation. Erin Galloway was always building something larger than a YouTube channel. The audience was the amplifier. The ranch was the laboratory. The nonprofit was the endgame. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. The question a lot of people had in 2024 was whether Our Wyoming Life could survive as a solo operation after nearly a decade of being a two-person brand. By 2025, the answer was clear. The subscriber count had held near 290,000. The content had shifted in a direction that, if anything, gave the audience more than it had before. More unfiltered access to Erin's actual internal life, not just the operational realities of the ranch. The combination of real cattle work, direct food systems content, nonprofit updates, and raw personal moments like the father video produced something that functioned differently than the original channel. It was no longer a family ranch documentary. It was something closer to an ongoing first-person record of what it actually takes to run a working ranch alone, as a woman in her 40s, raise 3 children, run a business, and stay honest about all of it on camera. The ranch itself had become something worth documenting on those terms. USDA-inspected beef and pork shipping across all 50 states, a farm store operating off a county highway south of Gillette, a nonprofit actively addressing food access across the region, a team of 3 managing what used to be a larger family operation. Erin describes the channel as therapeutic, not in a passive or avoidant sense, but in the specific sense of demonstrating to other people that they are not alone in what they are dealing with. Whether that's losing livestock, losing a marriage, losing a parent you'd already lost years before they died, or just trying to hold a complicated operation together with not enough hours in the day. That is what the channel confirms now, not a rumor about what went wrong, a confirmation of what's being built on the other side of it. The truth about Our Wyoming Life in 2025 is simpler and harder than the headline version of the story suggests. A woman who grew up feeling out of place in San Francisco, who walked away from 2 decades of corporate success, who lost her stepfather and then her marriage, and who somewhere in that sequence also founded a nonprofit and converted a family ranch into a fully direct-to-consumer business. That woman didn't pivot. She didn't reinvent herself for the algorithm. She just kept doing what she had been doing with one fewer person in the frame, and let the audience come to their own conclusions about what that said about her. The channel keeps going, the ranch keeps shipping, the Edible Prairie Project keeps growing, and Erin Galloway keeps pointing her phone at herself in the cab of a gator and telling people the parts of the story that most people in her position would have kept private. What comes next for Our Wyoming Life is more of the same, and that turns out to be exactly what the audience keeps coming back for. Here's the question worth asking. Would you have kept the channel if you were in Erin's position? Or would the divorce announcement have been the last video you ever posted?